Life Audio.
Hey, Dr. Bill Sinyard here with Gospel Rant and Gospel Rant Ministries. I'm going through my top 10 prayers of the Old Testament. Lots of fun, lots of disagreements because everybody has their list, right? My criteria, and it's my show, I'm more heavily weighting those prayers that expose some key attributes, some core DNA of God that are so off the chart, so astonishing and unique, and only unique to God, Father, Son, and Spirit, that have obviously been revealed to the one making the prayers and is motivating them, driving them, making them cry out to God specifically for these things. So how do the prayers proclaim the love of God for the unlovable, the unloved, and the unlovely? There's so many Old Testament prayers done by men and women too. I found that some of my top 10, because of the core criteria, aren't on other lists. That doesn't bother me at all. It's a rant, after all, and you may disagree. So be it. Talk to me, Bill at gospel-app.com. Love to hear what you think. Some great prayers aren't on my top 10. Maybe you think should be, like Jonah's prayer from the belly of the whale, or easily top 20, Psalm 73, why do wicked prosper? Man, I have used that prayer so many times, and that would almost made my top 10, one of my favorites. But I have to start somewhere. We're at number 6, and I think you'll agree. Welcome to Gospel Rant and God's love for the unlovable. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Context. God tells Moses publicly that he is indeed going to fulfill the letter of the bargain that he made with Israel and return them to the land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, 33:1 of Deuteronomy. He's even going above and beyond by sending an angel to drive out the ites, the Canaanites, Amorites, etc. But then he drops the hammer and no doubt catches Moses off guard. But, God says, I will not go with you because you are a stiff-necked people and I might destroy you on the way. Boy, that might stimulate some fears in us, right? Because, I guess we're stiff-necked people often. Literally, he's saying, I will not go up within your bowels. But it's an idiom, rightly translated, among you. I tell you that because it's really more intimate than just with you, right? He's not like riding on the next seat on the train. Stiff-necked could be difficult-necked or impudent-necked. I mean, you get the idea. And note, these were recently generational slaves set free. Of course they were stiff-necked. That's the nature of slaves. And this is how their generationally traumatized midbrains have been programmed for generations. We're not that different. When God finds us, they will submit on the outside, right? Stiff-necked, redeemed slaves, and they'll do it out of fear of being punished. But on the inside, there's roiling bitterness, anger, rage, fears of being abused and used or getting it wrong. And God knows this. He loves the unlovable, right? Sometimes we read this and it seems that God is taken by surprise by the stiff-neckedness, the unfaithfulness of the Jews and acts like, oh my goodness, he can't control himself, his temper, right? So he's saying something like, better not hang with you guys because I'm going to likely lose control, get ticked off, and in a rage, in a moment, wipe you off the planet. And, that wouldn't be good. So the only way that I can stand you guys, keep my promise to your righteous forebearer, Jacob, by the way, irony abounds, righteous forebearer, is to stand a bit of a distance, right? No. Come on, nobody thinks that's the case, right? That's absurd. That's a caricature. Rather, this interaction is for the Jews. God is in the process of rewiring the stiff-necked brains of slaves. That's the question. How do you transform the generational inner wiring of generational slaves? Well, God could just wave his hands and give them a new heart that's perfectly submissive. I'm telling you, that's just not his jam. He is miraculous, but far more subtle, and how he does this is above my pay grade. I mean, I'm kind of liking that strategy. The comment that he's making here with Moses does have a powerful effect on these former slaves. Moses tells the people what God said. They call it harsh words, ra. It's harsh. And they begin the process of public mourning. I mean, they notice. It's a dark come to Jesus moment for these redeemed slaves. I mean, it grabbed their attention. It changes also how God and Moses speak. It ignites a new intimacy. Exodus 33:11. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as a man speaks with his friend. Look, let's not jump over that verse from an Old Testament perspective. That is amazing. Get the scene. Very flawed Moses and holy, holy God are dialoguing face to face. In the Hebrew, paneh to paneh, literally nose to nose. Don't think of this literally. This is a euphemism for how friends treat each other. It says so, right? I can assume that this is, oh my goodness, some kind of mutual respect, right? No one would ever heard of such a thing in Egypt. Ra doesn't speak to Pharaoh that way. But here is an exiled, broken, murdering sheep herder who God is treating like a peer. And God and Moses are not peers, don't get me wrong, but Moses is being treated with such honor that hasn't been seen since maybe Abraham. When was the last time anyone treated Moses that way? His life was filled with being treated unjustly. What must Moses be thinking? What's in his head? What's he feeling? He may have had the Spirit put upon him, we're not told. He did experience God in a way that few before him had. Moses called it favor, chen in the Hebrew. Noah felt this from God, Genesis 6:8. God made Pharaoh feel chen to Israel, favor, and this was a result that he was going to let them, honor them, even though they were slaves, to go and worship their God in the desert. It's the word used in Deuteronomy 24 to speak of how a husband should feel towards a wife. Think honored, respected, cherished, seen as worthy, seen as lovable. This is not how a master normally speaks to a slave. I mean, why? Because the slave might begin to think they have worth and revolt. Or their inner working protective reactionary models might begin to be rewired a little. I think that's the point. So here's my number 6 top 10 prayer of the Old Testament. 4 times Moses will tell God that he really, really, really wants God's chen, his favor, and that it be seen publicly. Otherwise, he just could not lead with any real authority. In fact, he will admit that the prime thing that must distinguish him and us today from others, from the nations, is that we are people that God chens, favors. Verse 16. It must be able to be observed. It's a proof of a real relationship with this invisible deity. Jesus said something like it. They will know you are his followers, Christians, by your love. And not just trying harder love, a better, more improved human love. No, a miraculous heaven-born love that can actually love people who hurt them. Verse 12. Moses said to the Lord, you have been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor, chen, with me. If you are pleased, there's the word again, chen, with me, teach me your ways so that I may know you and continue to find chen with you. Meaning, don't step away from me. Don't stand back. Be with me in my bowels. Remember that this nation is your people. The Lord replied, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. That's Exodus 33:12-14. Translation? Okay, my presence will go up. My presence is literally my nose or my face, paneh. It's the idiom used before where they spoke paneh to paneh. What is the essence behind the idiom? I mean, think about it. If we speak to someone face to face, what we mean by that is we not only hear their words, but we link it to their face, their eyes, their expression. We say, I could see it in her or his eyes, right? So it's Google Meeting, it's Zoom. We see them face to face. We get to read what they think of us, really. We know what they meant. We know how they felt about their words, how they feel about us. Do they resent us? I mean, their eyes are furrowed and their eyes knit together. Do they see us as nothing? They won't make eye contact with us. Or do they adore us, value us, love us, chen us, And you can tell generally, unless they're just acting. I think of a mother holding her infant up close to her face, right? Pane to pane, face to face. Scientists call this attunement. This is probably a good time to take a breath, get a word from our sponsors, and we'll see you in a moment. So if you're familiar with my online program for parents of teens called Good Enough Parent, goodenoughparent.online, you know about attunement and the attachment theory. God made our brains for certain core attachments, and here's one scientist explaining it. Buckle up. From a neurobiological standpoint, attachment is considered a basic, inborn, biologically adaptive motivational system that drives the infant to create a few selective attachments in his life. These attachments provide a relationship in which the infant will, 1, seek proximity to the attachment figure, 2, have a sense of a safe haven, which when he is upset, the attachment figure will soothe his distress, and 3, develop an internal working model of a secure base, an internal schema of the self with the other self with attachment figure that will provide him with a security, enabling him to explore the world and have a sense of well-being and to soothe himself in times of distress in the future. You got that right. Here's the same thing in more layman's terms from Dr. David E. Arredondo, explaining the power of caregiver-infant attunement during the first years of life. This mother and this baby are in a process, a form of reciprocal connectedness called attunement. His eyes and her eyes are locked together, not locked together, but dancing together, really. And in this child's brain, 1,000 connections per second are being formed, and this child is learning to read facial expression. This child is learning about the world. He's learning that the world is responsive or not responsive. He's learning that he can be an object of delight and that he can delight others. He's learning what he's worth. He's learning what the world is like. He's learning so much so quickly that we can't even conceive of it. Attunement, attachment. So am I saying that this is what Moses or God was talking about? Yeah, to one degree or another. This, my presence will go up, implied with you, would have been more than just a contractual bond where two people are allied but remain distant and strangers, basically. This is more intimate. Once again, I ask the question, how do you rewire the deeply entrenched brain models of traumatized generational slaves? Again, that's where God finds us too. My answer is God's experiential presence, going with them face to face, attunement, spiritual attunement. He expresses, manifests, makes us feel his favor towards us as we are. God's love for the unlovable. Moses seems to realize how important this visceral, intimate attachment relationship with God really is. And that is why it is my number 6 prayer. Here it is. And Moses said to God, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. Meaning, just let us die here in the wilderness. How will anyone know that you're pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? Exodus 33, 15 to 16, my number 6 prayer. And again, think intimacy here. Think attunement. Moses says, man, if these people, these stiff-necked slaves, if we don't get it, if we're not experiencing not just your presence, but your favor towards us, we're not going to make it. It's wow. That's a wow prayer. So God, if I'm your son in legal terms only, and maybe I'll experience your favor towards me, how much you love me and like me sometime later in heaven, but I'm here, honestly, with all due respect, I'm not interested. Deism, it has no value to me. I'm in trouble here. I need that favor from God. I have way too many insecurities. I need to experience God's miraculous love for the unlovable, the unloved, and the unlovely today. Now, I need to begin to grasp the height and width and length and depth of the love of Jesus for me today, tomorrow, and the next day, and for other people through me. See? So it's like it was said, for most of my career, I have led a traumatized, stiff-necked bunch of former slaves. I mean, pastoring a church. And we needed the intimate experience of God's love for us as we were. Look, I don't want to get into technical arguments about how we can't see God's face because we're sinners and He's holy. That's a different beast. Moses is not talking about looking into God's nose. He wants God's favor. It's a euphemism. He wants experience that God likes him, loves him, and that favor must be public somehow, or else he would just be another leader, just another Pharaoh. And listen, which is harder for redeemed sinners, to visually see God's face or to emotionally really get how much He adores us? Which one is my brain going to react against the quickest? The second one. Which is more important? The second one, which has the effect of beginning to rewire beat up generational slaves or traumatized human beings or those who have been disappointed by relationships all of their lives. This is a bold, insightful, and dangerous prayer by often confused, insecure, and anxious Moses. He steps up here. He had to think, maybe he was terrified, but he had to think that God could have called his bluff. Okay, all right, Moses, you win. I better not go up with you. Wow, ouch, that would have left a mark. But this was so important that he risked it, and it's what God wanted him to say. Think of that infant looking up into that loving, adoring face of her mother and saying, hey, girl, if we're not going to tune regularly, because I need this so much, can you just hand me off to somebody who would do that? It's comical, right? It's absurd, but that's the scene. I've borrowed Moses' prayer so often in those moments in ministry and relationships where I felt lost, exposed, abandoned, attacked, about to crash and burn, and alone. I didn't see God's nose. I served stiff-necked people, and I needed help. I was confident in my prefrontal cortex that I was God's son and that He was with me and loved me, but in the moment, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel His presence. I didn't feel His nose up in mine, His face up in mine. God, if you're going to abandon me, let me know. I'm willing to fall, but I'm really not willing to fall without being in your face and your face in mine. Do you like me still? Does that make sense? It's the bold and courageous and, our humiliating prayer of one who has experienced the favor, the chen of God, of Jesus, the Spirit, and needs it more and more, who longs for it, jones for it like an addict. That's me. How else will others know that it is not just me espousing some philosophical religious nonsense like some other religion? But if I'm face to face with God, with Jesus, His glory shines in my face, and somehow I'm changed, like a baby's face when he or she is in the middle of being attuned with her mother's eyes. We're transformed. People can see it. You know what I'm talking about, right? Don't you want that? So many Christians have chosen to relegate that relationship with God to something more transactional, philosophical, something prefrontal cortex. Please, I'm begging you, don't. Remember, God by nature loves the unlovable, the unloved, and the unlovely, and that's all of us on any given day. If you want to experience it more today, ask. Like Moses before you, ask. God, give me your favor. Make me feel it. The one purchased by Jesus, for me 2,000 years ago. Make me experience it. Here's a gospel presentation we designed a while back for Christians to say aloud twice a day to your beat-up, generationally slaved midbrain. We call it the Simple Included Gospel. You can get it at our website, gospel-app.com. Some churches actually hand this out to visitors. Some put it in bulletins. I love that. It's fun. So here it is, my modernized Mosaic prayer. Jesus follower, strictly because of what Jesus did for you 2,000 years ago, Jesus loves you with all His heart, as much as the Father loves the Son and the Son loves the Father. God loves you as you are, not as you should be or could be. You can't add to this love or take away from it. It often feels like you've messed it up or need to do something so that God would like you better. Not so. How do you experience it more? Simple. Ask the Spirit inside of you to make you know, experience, and feel just how much God loves you right now. Just ask. Ask again later today. Ask tomorrow. Make it a spiritual habit. Well, I hope this hits you the way it hits me. Way to go, Moses. If you like this, I think you're going to really enjoy my newest teen fantasy, Tale of the Unlikely Prince. It's inspired by Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, great for adults too. Great reviews, by the way, 5-star. on Amazon, Kindle, and Audible. By the way, I just got an 8 out of 10 review from Book Life. Very important, and won first place for children's fantasy at an international book contest. You know, it's good for young readers and adults alike. I'm getting great reviews. Check it out. Get some for the 10 to 15-year-olds in your life in church. Again, Amazon, Audible, and Kindle. I've also published a great devotional for women, Dance Daughters of the Most High. It's about 7 overlooked and underappreciated and often misunderstood women in the Old Testament. Meet the women. Some were unnamed. They defied the odds. They became mothers of our faith, great for individual devotions or book clubs or Bible studies. And listen, if you've benefited from this show, please like, follow, or subscribe. Not too much to ask. You will be notified when other shows are published. Thanks. Take heart, child of God.